secure top here, and these are the 100 most classified excavations in the entire history of archaeology. Ancient inscriptions of pharaohs in the Nile. Archaeologist divers at the bottom of the murky waters of the Nile in Egypt explored algae-covered rock formations. At first glance, the stones seemed unremarkable. However, upon closer inspection, scientists discovered several inscriptions related to ancient pharaohs. A joint team of Egyptian and French archaeologists decided to explore the ruins of the reservoir in Aswan. Beneath algae, they found several carved images at least 2,300 months old. The images range from drawings of ancient Egyptian pharaohs to hieroglyphs. In the photo, you can see several well-preserved carved figures. The shapes are blurred by water and are quite difficult to distinguish. One set of inscriptions looks like a row of mannequin heads above two objects resembling tombstones. These ancient inscriptions are still being studied. Archaeologists believe that these findings may help us better understand how ancient kings ruled in those distant times. A strange place for a sphinx. The Sphinx stands in a very inconvenient place for a monument of its era. It is not carved from blocks like the pyramids, but from a single mass of rock, in a lowland that was regularly flooded even in ancient times. Its body is badly damaged, and even during the New Kingdom, the Egyptians carried out large-scale restoration work, as if they had inherited an object that was already ancient even for them. This is recorded in inscriptions and layers of restoration, not in later fantasies. The strangest detail is the absence of direct evidence of construction. No inscriptions, reliefs, or nearby construction settlements exist about the foundation, which is unusual for Egypt. The pyramids are far better documented than the Sphinx, despite being much more complex. All that connects it to Khafre is context, the logic of its location, and stylistic similarities, but not direct evidence. The Sphinx is a massive object lacking identification, which sparks debate. Geologists paid attention to the signs of erosion, archaeologists to the strange voids and shafts around it, and historians to the silence of the sources. None of these factors alone proves a different date, but together they make the Sphinx an inconvenient object for the simple explanation. What matters here isn't if it's thousands of years older than the pyramids, but something else. Pre-dynastic finds show that Egypt knew how to work with symbols, the body, ritual, and space long before the pharaohs. Against this background, the Sphinx is no longer a miracle from nowhere, but part of a long process whose beginning we see, though its end remains unclear. An entire city lies at the bottom of the lake. In Kyrgyzstan, the mountain lake Issyk-Kul is one of the largest in the world, almost 200 kilometers long, surrounded by the ridges of the Tian Shan Mountains. It does not freeze even in winter due to its salinity and depth. In 2023 and 2024, a group of diver researchers explored the underwater area near the shore, and what they described in the expedition report sounds like the plot of an adventure movie. On the lakebed, there are streets, brick buildings, and furnace complexes. Under layers of white sand, there is a well-preserved cultural layer, literally permeated with traces of human activity. Fragments of ceramics, animal bones, and slag from metal smelting. Next to the buildings, a Muslim necropolis from the 13th, 14th centuries was discovered. A cemetery measuring 300 by 200 meters, neat and well preserved. People lived here, traded, buried their dead, and then the water came and covered the whole city. The Tian Shan Mountains are seismically active, and geologists link the flooding to a major earthquake in the 15th century. The shore subsided, the water level rose, and the city disappeared. Apparently, there were few casualties. People managed to leave in time. After that, the shores of Issyk-Kul continued to be used by nomadic tribes. Small villages still stand here to this day. But here's what's important. For centuries, trade routes of the Silk Road passed around this lake. The main route went from the Chui Valley through the Badel Pass into China. And Issyk-Kul was not just a lake. It was a crossroads where merchants from dozens of countries met. Silks, spices, metals, and ideas were exchanged here. And now, this trading post on one of the main routes of the medieval world lies a few meters underwater, along with its streets, ovens, and cemetery. Underwater excavations have only just begun, and researchers say that the well-preserved cultural layer promises many more discoveries. No one knows exactly what else lies there yet. The bracelet that shouldn't exist. In 2008, fragments of a bracelet were found in Denisova Cave in the Altai. Denisova Cave is a place in the Altai Mountains in Siberia, where, several tens of thousands of years ago, the paths of three different types of humans crossed at once: Denisovans, Neanderthals, and our direct ancestors. Imagine three different types of humans living in the same region. Sometimes they meet, sometimes they fight, sometimes they have children together. It sounds like the plot of a science fiction novel or a video game, but this is not fiction or imagination. This is literally what happened in the Altai region many years ago. They lived side by side, sometimes fought, sometimes traded, and even had children together. All of this has been proven by DNA analysis of real samples. Science has done what once seemed impossible. It has reconstructed the relationships between different human species. In 2010, scientists compared the DNA of modern humans with DNA extracted from Denisovan and Neanderthal bones for the first time. And they discovered that these sequences are present in the genomes of living people right now. You yourself quite likely carry a few percent of Neanderthal DNA. This is not a metaphor or a poetic image. This is literally a fact that can be verified by taking a test at the nearest genetic laboratory. We don't just study these people from afar. In the most literal sense, we are their descendants, with fragments of their DNA living inside us right now. Some people living today carry a few percent of Denisovan DNA and simply don't know it. The bracelet belonged specifically to the Denisovans. Chlorite is a semi-precious mineral with a greenish hue that had to be found, extracted, and processed. It was polished so well that on a sunny day it reflects light, and by a nighttime campfire, it shines with a deep emerald color. It's a beautiful item. The find is 50,000 years old. That's already incredible in itself. At school, we were told that the Stone Age was all about clubs and caves, but here we see an ornament. This is already aesthetics, which shows that the Denisovan wanted to look beautiful. It's a need that, for some reason, we tend to consider purely modern. But when scientists looked at the hole in the bracelet under a microscope, the story became completely different. The hole was drilled, perfectly even with smooth walls. Imagine you're trying to drill through hard stone without any metal tools. All you have is another stone, bone, or wood. You're working by hand, rotating the tool manually, trying to keep a constant speed. You'll end up with something uneven, with jagged edges and irregularities. It's impossible to keep the speed and direction constant by hand. But here we see perfectly smooth holes. That's exactly what amazes researchers. If you drilled this by hand, the walls of the hole would be uneven, with characteristic scratches and irregularities. That's not the case here. The walls are smooth as if a machine was used. Officially, this technology appeared among humans in the Neolithic era, about 12,000 years ago. The bracelet is 4 times older than that. Imagine putting a smartphone in front of a medieval blacksmith and telling him it was made in the year 800. That's about how the scientists felt. The head of the excavation, Anatoly Derevienko, described the technique briefly. The ancient craftsman used techniques not previously linked to the Paleolithic era. His colleague Mikhail Shunkov said directly, the Denisovans were technologically more advanced than Homo sapiens and Neanderthals of the same period. A bold statement, but he has the bracelet in his hands, and so far, there's no other way to explain it. Of course, there were skeptics. The bracelet could have ended up in this layer from more recent deposits. Additional research was conducted. Oxygen isotope analysis confirmed the layer was undisturbed, and the bracelet had been there since Denisovan times. Now, scientists from Russia, Britain, and Australia are re-examining all the dating. There is new data suggesting that the age could be even greater, up to 65,000 years. If this is confirmed, explaining the origin of this bracelet will be even more difficult. That's what still worries and troubles me. From an entire species of people who lived on Earth for tens of thousands of years, only a few teeth, a fragment of a pinky finger, and this bracelet remain. A bracelet that catches the sunlight and shouldn't exist. I'm sure that we still don't know a lot about our past, especially about the beings who were very much like us. They lived here for tens of thousands of years. They built, they thought, they wanted to be beautiful. And from all of that, only one green bracelet remains. The forgotten color of Egypt. Almost 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians created something that eluded everyone who came after them. We're not talking about a temple or a ritual, but about a color, Egyptian blue. It was the first artificial pigment in human history. Its recipe disappeared after the Roman Empire. For centuries, people tried to recreate it, but without success. Only recently have scientists managed to recreate it again, using modern microscopes, high temperatures, and almost blind persistence. The pigment was created by heating silicon, copper, calcium, and sodium to 1,000 degrees. The amazing thing is not in the composition, but in the result. The recreated samples turned out to be complex, heterogeneous, with unique properties. Egyptian blue not only retains its brightness after thousands of years, it also emits near-infrared light. That's why it's now being studied not only by archaeologists, but also by developers of technologies for protection, analysis, and technical applications. It turns out the ancients knew more than we think, and perhaps they used these properties not just for beauty. Sometimes color is not just paint, it's a language, and if we decipher it, we'll hear something much older than the pyramids themselves. Ritual table in Tava Tepe. In Azerbaijan, a team of Italian and Azerbaijani archaeologists discovered a 3,500-year-old ritual table in the ancient settlement of Tava Tepe. This place is located near the borders of Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. During the excavations, a round adobe structure was found. The structure includes a kitchen area and a ritual table. Between 1,500 and 750 BC during the Late Bronze and Early Iron Ages, nomadic peoples probably used Tava Tepe as a resting place before traveling through the mountains. Archaeologists also found a ritual table with 8 recesses and many ceramic containers, bowls, vessels made of black-fired ceramics, and long flat pebbles for stirring food. In the corner of the kitchen, a thick layer of ash and clay tokens with fingerprints have been preserved, which may have served as food ration tokens. At the entrance, there were originally wooden columns, and a thatched roof covered the entire complex with a diameter of about 15 meters. Outside, animal bones and discarded pottery were found, as well as human figurines placed in sacrificial pits, and the fact that the structure was sealed together with all the dishes, indicating its ceremonial nature. Matriarch Çatalhöyük looked like a chaotic hive of clay houses, but DNA analysis of 131 skeletons put everything in its place. Under the floors of neighboring dwellings, relatives were buried strictly along the maternal line, grandmother, mother, daughter, in one burial or in 2 adjacent rooms. Men, on the other hand, were placed without a clear pattern. It turns out that the center of social organization in this Neolithic city was women, and blood was passed down through the female line. Especially telling are the gifts: tiny beads made from shells, lapis lazuli from the mountains of Afghanistan, miniature figurines of the mother goddess. All of these are placed not with adults, but with infant girls. The burial riches seem to foreshadow the future role of the mistress of the house, while boys receive a minimum of ornaments. Even the layout of the neighborhoods points to a female-centered structure. The houses are grouped in clusters of 3 around hearths, where the walls are decorated with hunting scenes, but the central place is occupied by female silhouettes with emphasized hips, a symbol of abundance. Çatalhöyük has often been called egalitarian, since everyone had similar dwellings, so that must mean equality. Genetics reveals a nuance. Yes, there are almost no property classes, but real power lies in kinship ties, and they are governed by the maternal line. Beer Quarry Cave. This Roman quarry was once a hideout for smugglers, and now rare species of bats live here. The beer stone quarried here was an important building material even in Roman times. 2,000 years of quarrying have created a winding system of caves near the village of Beer, which gave its name to this stone. The first Romans arriving in Devon noticed the limestone cliffs at the mouth of the River Exe. They discovered veins of granular limestone and began to quarry it. When the surface deposits were exhausted, the Romans dug deeper into the rocks, extracting the stone with pickaxes and wooden wedges. This stone was used to build important public buildings. The stone was transported to the river and sent off by boat. After the Romans left, the quarries were used by the Saxons. Their workings were distinguished by sharp square corners, unlike the Romans' round ones. Beer stone was easy to work with, but it hardened in the air, becoming stronger. It was cut on site and used to build such buildings as Windsor Castle, London Bridge, and Westminster Abbey. The stone was also used in the construction of Christ Church Cathedral in St. Louis, USA. After the Protestant Reformation, Catholics held secret masses in these caves. In the early 19th century, smugglers, including Jack Rettenbury, used the caves to hide contraband from sea vessels. Stone quarrying stopped in the early 20th century when a new site was discovered. Now, these caves are of special scientific interest because of rare bats. Ancient graffiti in the Sigiriya fortress are unique inscriptions found on the walls of the ancient Sigiriya fortress, located on top of a monolithic rock in central Sri Lanka. These graffiti represent one of the most important collections of ancient inscriptions on the island, dating approximately from the 5th to the 8th centuries AD. They were left by visitors to the fortress, including poets, pilgrims, and travelers. On the mirror walls, polished to a shine, which once adorned the inner halls and corridors of the palace. The Sigiriya graffiti consists of poetic lines, comments, and personal impressions written in the Sinhalese language using ancient forms of script. Despite their historical value, the interpretation of the Sigiriya graffiti is a subject of debate among historians. Questions about who exactly left these inscriptions, their social status, motives, and purposes remain open. Some researchers believe that the graffiti were created by members of the upper classes, visitors to the palace. Others suggest that they may have been left by pilgrims and merchants, indicating that the fortress was accessible to the general public. Myths. If the Nazis were truly inventive in anything, it was in how they rewrote myths. Almost any ancient culture in which an echo of the power of sacrificial ritual could be found was turned into yet another Aryan source. And it didn't matter how historically justified it was, the main thing was that it sounded impressive. With the Vikings, everything was simple. They were taken as an example of pure masculine principle: runes, swords, and images of grim heroism. Because of this logic, Himmler aimed to make the SS a cult with symbols, rituals, and even places of power instead of an army. That same Wewelsburg Castle was supposed to become something like a new Valhalla, a temple for a future caste of warrior priests. With the Aztecs, things were more complex. They were geographically too far away, but the Nazis were interested in their sacrifices. They were attracted to the very idea, ritual death as an act of power and subjugation. In the records of the SS, there are mentions of parallels between Germanic myths and the mythologies of the Americas. Perhaps they weren't looking for connections, but for justification. They needed to prove that human life is a resource, that sacrifice can be sacred and controlled. And then there's Atlantis. There were no boundaries here at all. There were many theories, but they adopted one of them. Supposedly, the Atlanteans are actually the Proryans, a tall white race possessing technology and knowledge destroyed by a catastrophe. And the mission of the Reich is to reclaim what was lost, to rethink the fall, to build a new order from the old ruins. The Nazis didn't just believe in these stories. They made them into a structure, an architecture of meaning, which they used to justify their power. And that's exactly why all of this is still frightening today. For them, myths were blueprints, not fairy tales. Napoleon's bathroom. In the Villa Pisani in northern Italy, Napoleon's bathroom has been preserved, a place rarely shown to tourists, but one that perfectly reflects his character. For the early 19th century, this was nearly futuristic luxury. Built into the bathtub is a special space for care and personal belongings, which Napoleon even took with him on his campaigns. He was unusually clean for his time, washed every day, used cologne with rosemary and citrus, shaved daily, and always carried a travel hygiene kit with him. Contemporaries remembered his white teeth and neatness in everyday life, a rare quality for an era when many people bathed only once a month. His mother taught him this habit, and he kept it, even in the army and at the height of power. The bathroom at Villa Pisani is a rare case where a personal detail of the emperor has been preserved almost unchanged, showing what he was like outside the battlefield and politics. The Sumerian planisphere. In the 19th century, archaeologists were sorting through the library of King Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, and among thousands of tablets, they found a strange round piece of clay. It had sector lines and cuneiform writing on it, Later, it turned out that they were looking at one of the oldest star maps created by the Sumerians about 5,500 years ago. The planisphere is small, but it is carefully made. It marks sections of the sky, the positions of celestial bodies, and notes about a rare, bright object that was observed in that era. For the Sumerians, this was not an abstraction. Such tablets helped them calculate time, holidays, and agricultural cycles. People looked at the sky not for romance, but because they needed to know when to expect floods, storms, or the start of a season. And the most amazing thing is that this map is still readable today. Even after thousands of years, you can see how the ancient inhabitants of Mesopotamia tried to bring order to the night sky and make it understandable. This small object shows how early people began to systematically study the world around them. Man-made caves underground, England, Shropshire, on the grounds of Cainton Hall. If you walk across the field and look carefully at your feet, you can notice a small hole in the ground, about the size of a rabbit's paw. But this burrow leads down into a large underground hall, and then into the next one, and then into an entire system of man-made chambers carved into the red sandstone, with arched ceilings, with niches and columns. The official Cainton caves are dated to the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Someone put in incredible effort to carve out these halls. The exact purpose is unknown, maybe for storage, maybe as a place of solitude. But popular rumor has long connected this place with the Templars, a Catholic military order founded in the 12th century, which in 200 years became the richest organization of the medieval world. In 1307, the French king Philip IV arrested the order's leadership. Torture and executions began, and the order was disbanded. And to this day, it is still unknown where the Templar treasures went. The shape of the halls really does resemble Romanesque chapels. Low arches, a certain symmetry, niches where statues could have stood. In 2012, the entrance was sealed off because of vandals and people who used the underground halls for occult rituals. Traces of candles and devilish symbols were found on the walls here. In 2017, a photographer published pictures of these halls from the inside, and the images of the cave instantly spread all over the internet. Most likely, this is just a beautiful place built in the 19th century by some wealthy landowner with a vivid imagination, and there were never any Templars there. But here's what's interesting. Even if you remove all the legends, the question doesn't go away. Someone put in a huge amount of effort to carve several neat halls with arches and niches into the rock. Why here? Why like this? And why at all? No one really knows to this day. A man-made giant under the ice. Under several kilometers of Antarctic ice, scientists have detected a structure that cannot be accidental. It stretches for 300 kilometers, has a geometrically precise shape, and its density is comparable to metal. Nature does not create objects like this. The discovery was made by an international team led by geophysicist Andrew Carlson. Satellite data and radar revealed something that resembles either an artificial structure or an unexplained catastrophe from ages past. The scientist himself admits this could change everything we know about our planet. There are many theories. It's either a ship, a city, or a natural anomaly that shouldn't exist. Some suggest that it might be the remains of a prehistoric or extraterrestrial civilization. For now, drilling is impossible, but a new expedition is being prepared. And if it's allowed, we might, for the first time, touch what has been lying under the ice in silence all these years. Mycenaean gold. Mycenaean. In 2004, archaeologists opened the sealed Tholos tomb of Kazanaki near Volos, a rare chance to see a Mycenaean luxury set in its original form. On the stone floor lay 7 burials, and among them were scattered 165 gold items, tiny discs, tubes, embossed beads, and weapon parts. Many of the plates are fractions of a millimeter thick. From 10 grams of metal, craftsmen hammered out 200 mini sun discs and sewed them onto fabric, turning the shroud into a reflective armor. The jewelry's main feature is its extreme fragility. The gold is minimally alloyed with copper for shine, and the edges are intentionally left unreinforced. Such an outfit was not worn in life, it was created for a single occasion, the funeral ceremony. Complex items like rings and dagger handles demonstrate the opposite approach. There, gold is just a thin shell. The base was made of bronze or wood, foil was applied on top, and the joints were masked with granulation and cloisonné enamel. In this way, the luxury is preserved visually, while less metal is actually used. This find revealed one of the main rules of the Late Bronze Age. Gold was not just a currency, but a shorthand for power. The thinner the sheet, the louder the visual effect and the clearer the message to future generations. Our family could afford to shine, even if there weren't really enough resources for it. The sword of Pharaoh Ramesses II. Archaeologists are making more and more discoveries in northern Egypt. Recently, they discovered the sword of Pharaoh Ramesses II there. Excavations were carried out in the province of El Buhaira, where they found architectural blocks that were once part of military barracks and weapons warehouses. In addition, personal belongings of soldiers from that time were also found. This discovery confirms the importance of the El Abqain fort as a key point of the Egyptian army. The sword that was found is made of bronze and has a cartouche with the name of Ramesses II. Weapons, amulets, hygiene items, and a cow burial were also discovered. Ramesses II, who ruled for more than 60 years, is considered one of the greatest pharaohs of Egypt. The ring belonged to a remarkable person. Assos is an ancient city with a rich history, founded in the 7th century BC. In this ancient city, located in the southwest of the Biga Peninsula in Turkey, archaeologists found a Roman ring with an image of Athena, the revered goddess of Assos. The ring was found in a building known as the Xenodokion, which served as a hostel in ancient times. Assos, founded by Greek settlers from the island of Lesbos, has deep historical roots going back to the Bronze Age. Athena, daughter of Zeus and one of the main deities of Olympus, became the patroness of the city. Assos was an important regional center and is mentioned in ancient texts alongside the cities of Asua and Pedasos. Assos excavations have continued for nearly 40 years under Turkish archaeologists' supervision. A ring with the image of Athena discovered in the Xenodokion likely belonged to a high-ranking resident of the city and was used as a seal, similar to modern signatures. According to our estimates, the artifact dates back to the 2nd or 3rd century AD. In the 19th century BC, the city of Assos was under the rule of Lydia, then became part of the Persian Empire, and later joined the Athenian Confederation. The city once again came under Persian control until Alexander the Great liberated it in 334 BC. Later, Assos became part of the Kingdom of Pergamon and then part of the Roman Empire. Over time, the city lost its significance, passing under the rule of the Byzantines, Seljuks, Franks, and Ottomans until 1330. Assos, a city that was considered a myth. And finally, a story that honestly sounds like a movie plot, Alexandria on the Tigris, a city founded by Alexander the Great during his Eastern campaign in the 4th century BC1. Of the many cities he named Alexandria. There were more than 20 of them throughout the conquered world. Most of them are well known. But Alexandria on the Tigris, in present-day Iraq, was considered for centuries either a myth or a place that had long been lost and would never be found. At the beginning of 2026, its rediscovery was announced. And without exaggeration, this became one of the most talked about news stories in the world of archaeology in many years. Because we're not just talking about some city, we're talking about a place that was part of the world of Alexander the Great, a man who changed the map of the planet in just 10 years. Satellite analysis of the area, comparison with ancient sources, and then excavations. And there it is, the city that for 2,000 years was considered a legend. A trading metropolis that once connected the Greek West and the Persian East stood at the crossroads of the major trade routes of its time. Imagine the scale. At its peak, everything literally passed through this city. Spices from India, silk from China, gold from Arabia, Greek philosophy, Persian astronomy. It wasn't just a trading post, it was a vibrant hub where two completely different worldviews met. Just imagine for a second the scale of this discovery. It took humanity 2,000 years to find the city founded by one of the most famous people in history. Alexander the Great is not an unknown leader of a small tribe. This is a man who is studied in every school in the world, and for 2,000 years, no one could find his city, even though ancient historians wrote about it. Strabo, Arrian, Diodorus, Siculus. Although people searched for it in different eras, each time they were just looking in the wrong place. It was only found when satellites appeared, which look from above and can see the outlines of buildings underground. Alexandria on the Tigris is not just another ancient city. It is a key hub through which goods, ideas, and people passed between two completely different civilizations. Greek philosophy, Persian mathematics, Indian spices, and Egyptian papyrus, all of this passed through places like this. And we couldn't find this particular city for 2,000 years. That's what amazes me. We're used to thinking that ancient history is more or less studied, that the main cities are known and the main routes are described. The main events are documented. Alexandria on the Tigris reminds us that this isn't the case, that even well-known historical figures like Alexander the Great, who changed the entire known world in 10 years of his campaign, left behind things we still haven't found, and places that are yet to be discovered, and that the satellites we launch for navigation and communication are also doing one of the most important jobs along the way. They look down at the Earth from above and help us find things that have been buried for thousands of years. Alexandria on the Tigris is the first major ghost city discovered this way, and most likely, it's far from the last. By the way, during the first excavations in 2026, they found coins with the profile of Alexander, remains of Greek columns, and fragments of trade records in two languages, Greek and Aramaic. This is literally material evidence of that very crossroads of civilization. Box bed. In late medieval Europe, there was a type of furniture that seems strange today, closed bed boxes. These are wooden boxes with doors or curtains, inside which there was a sleeping place, basically a bed closet. They were placed in homes for one simple reason: warmth. In unheated rooms, the temperature at night could be close to the outside temperature, and the walls were drafty from all sides. The closed bed retained a person's warmth, turning the small space into a cozy little house. Sometimes it was so warm inside that even babies were placed there so they wouldn't get cold. These beds were made from solid wood, decorated with carvings or ornaments. In wealthy homes, they blended with the decor, while in ordinary ones, they were just simple wooden boxes. People usually slept there half-sitting, as it was seen as healthier and more comfortable. An enclosed bed was considered a sign of wealth. It was placed in the warmest parts of the house, and sometimes it remained a symbol of status, almost like a private room. Today, you can see such beds in museums in France, the Netherlands, and Germany, and despite their strange appearance, it's actually surprisingly cozy inside, especially if you imagine how cold it was in European houses a few centuries ago. Kuvshinov Hill. In the very heart of the Libyan desert, 200 kilometers from the nearest oasis, there is a hill covered with thousands of ancient clay vessels. This is Abu Balaz, a place that still offers no clear answers. Why did the ancient Egyptians carry hundreds of kilograms of ceramics through the desert to leave them here? The vessels are up to 4,000 years old, and many were meant for water, but there are no springs or wells nearby. The sand hides the shards, but you can see them in the best preserved ones. They were left intentionally, in rows, neatly, like in a warehouse. Some scholars believe this was a staging post on the way to Central Africa. Others suggest that this was a supply point for some secret expedition. Perhaps it wasn't related to trade, but to the search for something we've long forgotten. A strange route going deep into the desert doesn't lead to any known cities. It ends in the sands as if the caravans never returned. The oldest Abkhazian alphabet has been deciphered. Since 1964, archaeologists have discovered 15 tablets with mysterious carvings at the site of an ancient settlement in Jordan. A recent analysis showed that the tablets were probably created by the Canaanites, an ancient Semitic people who lived in the territory of modern Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, as well as parts of Jordan and Syria. Research has revealed that the tablets contain 29 unique symbols written from left to right. These symbols include dots, vertical lines, and abstract drawings. Scientists believe that the inscriptions represent cult proverbs related to a religious temple. Some signs, such as a symbol resembling an eye, have been identified as ayin, which means eye in Hebrew. These parallels help to begin the decipherment. The Canaanites inhabited Canaan from 3,500 to 1,200 BC until they were conquered by the Israelite tribes. They are mentioned in the Old Testament. Interestingly, the Canaanite alphabet became the basis for the Phoenician script, which in turn influenced the Greek and Latin alphabets. Palm scroll. In 1938, an amazing discovery was made in India. Ancient palm scrolls containing extensive knowledge about medicine, astronomy, and other sciences. These scrolls are over 4,000 years old, which makes them one of the oldest libraries in the world. The contents of the scrolls are striking in their diversity, from medical treatises describing the treatment of various diseases to astronomical records detailing the movements of planets and stars. These scrolls represent an invaluable cultural heritage, opening a window into the world of ancient knowledge and practices. They confirm the high level of development of science and medicine in ancient India. The technique of their creation and preservation is of particular interest. Palm leaves, carefully processed and inscribed, could preserve information for millennia. Egyptian towers. When people think of the homes of ancient Egyptians, most imagine squat huts made of mud brick. Excavations in Amet in the northern delta radically changed this picture. Archaeologists uncovered a district from the late period, a whole street of tower houses, 4 to 5 stories tall, forming a dense wall along the processional road to the Temple of Wajet. The height is estimated at 12 to 15 meters, which for the 7th century BC is equivalent to a modern 5-story building. The lower levels are packed with grain silos and beer vats. Above are living rooms with narrow chimneys. Higher up are covered terraces, where date pits and bronze sistra of the goddess Hathor have been preserved. In the evening, they not only dined here, but also held musical rituals. 5 steps from the doors, a limestone promenade leads to Wajet's temple. The slabs are polished so well that even today they reflect the setting sun. And the cult columns stand exactly where the craftsmen of the 7th century BC placed them. It turns out to be a real mini Memphis in the province. Dense high-rises, a market, temple, and sacred road all crowded into one small area. 3 masonry repairs show people lived in the tower for at least 150 years. And on the facades, you can still see reliefs with Harpocrates and a green faience Ushabti, a sign that religion and everyday life literally shared the same wall here. And Amet breaks the old stereotype about single-story Egypt. The Gebel el Arak knife. This knife was found at the end of the 19th century near Gebel el Arak, and at first glance it looks like an ordinary ceremonial weapon from pre-dynastic Egypt. The flint blade is carefully crafted, and the handle is made of ivory. But the longer you look at it, the stronger the feeling that something about this item doesn't add up. A complex scene is carved on the handle. Figures of people, boats, groups locked in battle, and a central character who is holding 2 lions by their manes. The motif is completely uncharacteristic of early Egypt, but well known in Mesopotamia. This scene seems to have come from another cultural world, where developed mythological images of power, strength, and control over chaos already existed. For Egypt of the 4th millennium BC, this looks too early and too alien. A question arises, which is still debated. Was this a borrowed image, the result of distant contacts, or is this evidence that early Egypt was formed not in isolation, but in close dialogue with other centers of the ancient world? The knife itself was probably never used in battle. It is a symbol of status, power, and belonging to the elite, and that is its main value. It shows that even before the pharaohs, there were people who thought in terms of symbols, propaganda, and the demonstration of power. This means that behind the facade of prehistoric Egypt, there was already a complex and aggressive political reality. The Gebel el Arak knife does not prove the existence of a lost civilization, but it clearly shows one thing. The origins of Egyptian statehood were much more complex and international than is usually shown in simplified chronologies. The Sultan's treasure, the Hell's Well, or the Barhout Hole is a mysterious sinkhole in Yemen, surrounded by legends and myths. Local residents believe that at the bottom of the well, there are the Sultan's treasures, guarded by jinn and the dead, and that a cemetery-like smell comes from there. Scientific research has confirmed some of these legends. Speleologists finally decided to explore the sinkhole, taking samples from its bottom. The sinkhole has a conical shape. Its diameter at the surface is about 30 meters and it widens to 120 meters at the bottom. The well is 112 meters deep. The upper layer is porous and lets water through, while below, the layer becomes denser and impermeable, which leads to the formation of 4 waterfalls and stalagmites. The Sultan's treasures turned out to be cave pearls, rare formations of calcium carbonate that form around a grain of sand or a piece of wood. In Barhout, they have an emerald golden color, which probably misled ancient observers. At the bottom of the sinkhole, snakes and arthropods live. The grave-like smell described by the locals is caused by the decomposing bodies of animals, mostly birds, that fly into the well seeking shelter from the heat. After descending to the bottom, they cannot fly back up from such a great depth. There are two main hypotheses about the origin of the well. The first is that it is the former mouth of an underground volcano that has long been extinct. The second is that it is a natural well formed by water washing out underground layers over millions of years. Most likely, the Barhout well was formed in the second way, which explains its unusual structure and contents. Shamans are predicting a catastrophe. In Mexico, one of the ancient pyramids, which was used as an ancient well for sacrifices, collapsed, causing concerns about an impending catastrophe. The descendants of the tribe that built the pyramid fear that the collapse could be a harbinger of a major disaster caused by natural forces or some other phenomenon. In the photos from the scene, you can see that part of the structure collapsed after a heavy rain that occurred recently. The downpour washed away one side of the pyramid. These pyramids were built by the ancestors of the modern Purépecha, a warlike people who once managed to defeat the Aztecs. Historians claim that the Yucata pyramids were used by the Purépecha tribe for ritual sacrifices to their main god, Curacaueri. Anthropologist Toriquiri Alvarez stated that the collapse of the pyramid is not a bad omen. Local shamans believe that even the fall of a single stone was a bad omen, and the collapse of an entire wall means an inevitable disaster. A similar phenomenon was observed before the arrival of the conquistadors. 50,000 years and no explanation. In 1997, American archaeologist Albert Good began excavating a mound in South Carolina, a place called Topper. Even then, he found a tool that was 15,000 years old. This in itself was inconvenient, because according to the generally accepted version, people came to America no earlier than 12,000 years ago through the Bering Strait. Scientists just accepted it, thinking they moved faster than expected. It's easier to accept if you don't overthink it. But in January 2026, new results came from two laboratories at once, from deeper layers of the same hill. Two independent laboratories, different methods, and the same result, 50,000 years. Now that's something you can't just live with. 50,000 is 11 times further into the past than the Egyptian pyramids. At that time, Neanderthals were roaming Europe and there was no land route to America. The sea level was different, and the Bering Land Bridge had not yet appeared. That means there couldn't have been any humans in South Carolina 50,000 years ago at all. Yet here are the tools lying right there. The official response is silence. And this isn't the first time. When the data breaks too much of what is accepted as truth, the first reaction is almost always the same. Not let's check it, but it's probably a mistake. Not because scientists are bad people or do it on purpose, but because, like everyone else, they have something to lose. Dissertations, grants, university positions, reputations they've built over the years. If the 50,000-year date is confirmed, it won't just mean rewriting one article, but an entire field of science. And that's painful. It's easier to wait. No conferences, no urgent expeditions, just silence and cautious wording in private conversations, saying that it requires further study. Because to discuss this publicly means to admit that the entire theory of the settlement of the American continent, which is taught everywhere, needs to be revised. And that means other people's dissertations, other people's careers, other people's reputations. Nobody wants that. And that's why it's so important that a few researchers still say out loud that we need to keep digging. Because if people were in South Carolina 50,000 years ago, they couldn't have lived only there. There must be traces somewhere else. We just haven't looked yet. One person dug in one place for 50 years and found something. Imagine what will happen when such places start being searched systematically. It's only a matter of time. And maybe that's exactly why some people prefer not to rush. Although the honest answer here is that the longer you wait, the more questions pile up. All across North and South America, campsites that are 20, 25, even 30,000 years old keep being discovered. Each one can be disputed individually, but together they form a picture that's getting harder and harder to ignore. Topper is not the last inconvenient discovery in this part of the world. It's just the most recent and the most convincingly documented so far. Still, several researchers are saying out loud that new expeditions are needed all along the East Coast. Some suggest that the first Americans didn't travel through the tundra, but instead moved along the Pacific coast by boat, and all their campsites are now underwater because the ocean level has risen by 120 meters since then. That would explain why there are no traces. For now, it's just a theory. But at least it tries to answer the question. There's one thing I think is important. We say that mainstream science is silent. But let's be honest. There are scientists who understand that this obstacle is serious. They talk about it in private conversations, at small conferences, in careful wording in articles. They just don't say it out loud. Science knows how to answer the question how, but it struggles much more with the question, what if we are wrong? Human psychology is such that admitting our mistakes is very difficult. After all, then everything would have to be redone. It's a bit like the situation with the theory of plate tectonics. It was proposed back in 1912, but only seriously accepted in the 1960s. It took 50 years to acknowledge the obvious. And 9,000 kilometers from here, in Brazil, exactly the same story has been going on since the 1970s. But there, the story has a conclusion. Gold that fell from the rainbow. In a field near Leipzig, treasure hunter Daniel Fest was simply sweeping his metal detector along the edge of a freshly plowed field when the device gave a barely audible signal. He was expecting anything, a shell casing, a ring, a piece of machinery. But what landed in his palm was a tiny gold object weighing only 2 grams. After an examination, it became clear that this was a quarter stater, minted by the Celts about 2,200 years ago. It is the oldest gold coin ever found in Saxony. The obverse was decorated with the head of an animal resembling a deer, huge eyes, simplified antlers, and a rounded forehead. On the reverse, there was a torque with thickened ends, a star, and a central sphere. These motifs point to northern Bohemia, meaning the coin arrived in the region long before any Celtic authority appeared here. Such items were worn as a symbol of status, a talisman, or a means of saving among the elite. And the very fact that the coin ended up so far from Celtic territories speaks of powerful trade connections that stretched across Central Europe long before Rome. And it has an almost fairy tale name. Coins of this shape are called rainbow cups, Regenbogen Schuss Eichen. According to legend, they appeared where the rainbow touches the ground. Farmers found them in the fields after rain, believing that the gold had literally fallen from the sky. The last teeth of the Führer. When I read about the Argentine bases and Hitler's escape, I always had one question inside. Is there even a single direct piece of evidence that he actually died in 1945? In April 2024, the FSB published a photo that answered this question. The answer lies in the jaw. The remains officially recognized as Hitler's remains. They are kept in a cigarette box, 9 teeth, all authentic. French forensic expert Philippe Charlier compared this jaw with X-rays from 1944. The match is absolute. Moreover, traces of cyanide were found on the metal of the dentures. This confirms the suicide theory. Poison, capsule, gunshot, everything matches the official sources. It's a strange feeling. For so many years, we searched for conspiracies, theories, legends about an escape, but it all turned out to be much simpler. No tunnels, no doubles, no submarines, just a jaw, a dusty archive, decades without public disclosure. It's as if no one wanted this subject to be put to rest, maybe because reality isn't as spectacular as the myth. Scrolls and artificial intelligence. Thousands of fragments of texts were found in the caves of Qumran. Many of them are biblical. Some are unknown. But now, decades after their discovery, science is saying something that no one expected. These scrolls may not have just been written in that era. Some of them match in dating with the lives of the supposed authors of the Old Testament themselves. A team of researchers from the University of Groningen cleaned the manuscripts of castor oil used in conservation and conducted radiocarbon analysis again. As a result, it turned out that many texts are much older than previously thought. Some date back to the time of Ecclesiastes, others to the era of the prophet Daniel. But what's even more interesting is not the radiocarbon, but Enoch, an artificial intelligence trained on the structure of the ink and traces of writing. It determined the dating of the fragments with up to 85% accuracy without damaging the parchment. Moreover, it discovered graphic similarities that had previously been ignored, overlapping styles, intersections of eras, and handwriting. This means that we can not only read these texts, but we can also trace the hand that wrote them, understand when and where, and possibly even by whom. An ancient hater. In Russia, in Veliki Novgorod, archaeologists discovered a birch bark letter in which the author advises the recipient to hang himself. Russian scientists studied the finds made this season in the Novgorod region. Among them, a small letter with a single word stands out in particular. Someone named Prokosha wrote a brief letter to Nietzsche, simply saying, "Hang yourself." Apparently, even back then, there were already long-distance haters of a sort. Unfortunately, the beginning and end of this correspondence have not yet been found. Most of the artifacts discovered date back to the 12th century. However, not all letters were so rude. Waterfalls. In one of them, the scribe Roshko politely made a request to Stepan. In another letter, a trial by water is mentioned. The accused was thrown into the water and was considered guilty if the water did not accept him. Ruins of an ancient civilization underwater. In the early 2000s, a team of researchers led by the Canadian company Advanced Digital Communications made a sensational discovery off the coast of Cuba. At a depth of about 600 to 750 meters beneath the ocean, strange structures resembling stone buildings were discovered. These structures looked like organized rows of giant stone blocks, some of which had a regular rectangular shape and resembled massive walls or pyramid-like buildings. The initial results of underwater research conducted using modern sonar led to the hypothesis of a possible sunken city that might have been swallowed by the ocean tens of thousands of years ago. According to some estimates, the age of these ruins may exceed 50,000 years, which is significantly older than the earliest known civilizations, such as Sumer and ancient Egypt. This makes the possible discoveries even more intriguing, as it suggests the existence of ancient and possibly highly developed cultures that science knows nothing about yet. Some scientists believe that these ruins may represent the remains of an ancient city built before the last ice age, when the sea level was significantly lower. There is a theory that this area could have been inhabited by ancient peoples who were later forced to leave their homes due to the rising sea level. This hypothesis is supported by proponents of the theory about the existence of ancient sunken continents, such as Atlantis, described in the works of Plato. Some geologists suggest that these formations may be the result of natural geological processes, such as erosion, earthquakes, and other movements of the Earth's crust. Further research and analysis of the underwater ruins off the coast of Cuba require significant resources and time. Let's hope that the authorities will find the means to study these ancient ruins. The agonizing death of the screaming woman. In 1935, near Luxor, Egypt, a mysterious mummy was found, which was called the Screaming Woman because of her terrifying facial expression with her mouth open. Scientists believe the woman may have died from intense pain, causing a cadaveric spasm that froze her face in a grimace.
Зафиксировавшему ее лицо в крике.
The mummy was discovered by an archaeological expedition from the Metropolitan Museum of New York in the tomb of Senmut, the chief architect of Queen Hatshepsut. A burial chamber for his mother and other relatives was also found in this tomb. Despite the lavish burial, the screaming woman's identity and the cause of her expression remained a mystery for nearly a century. Archaeologists conducted detailed studies of the mummy using CT scanning and infrared imaging. The virtual autopsy showed that the woman was about 48 years old. Her height was about 150 centimeters, and she suffered from mild arthritis. Surprisingly, her internal organs, such as the brain, heart, and lungs, were intact, which did not correspond to the usual mummification practices of the New Kingdom era. Her burial included a black wig made of date palm fibers treated with minerals, and 2 rings with jasper scarabs, which indicates her high social status. Dr. Salem suggested that her facial expression might have been the result of cadaveric spasm, a rare condition in which the muscles that were actively used before death become fixed, indicating possible agony or severe stress. The embalmers mummified her body before it began to decompose and relax, preserving her mouth in an open position. A tomb with unique frescoes. In a small Tang Dynasty tomb in northern China, amazing frescoes were found depicting everyday life in the 8th century. The frescoes, dating back to the year 736, cover all the walls of the tomb except for the floor and depict scenes from the life of the Tang Dynasty. The tomb belonged to a man who died at the age of 63. The paintings are done in the Tang Dynasty style, using strong outlines and simple shading, and mostly appear two-dimensional. This style, called figure under the tree, was popular in Taiyuan, the capital of Shanxi province. The gates, corridor, and pedestal of the tomb are also decorated with frescoes. Guards are shown outside the gates. The frescoes lack vivid colors and do not feature famous or important people. In one scene, people are performing everyday tasks, such as grinding grain or drawing water from a well. In another, a woman with horses and a man with a whip are depicted, presumably from a non-Han ethnic group. The figures in the frescoes resemble the same man and woman, which leads archaeologists to believe that they were the owners of the tomb. A Byzantine icon ring. In Turkey near Malatya, archaeologists found a small ornament that can be attributed to the late Byzantine period, a ring with a miniature carved icon. It ended up in the ground about 1,000 years ago, but it looks as if it was just taken off someone's finger. The ring is made of bronze with an inlay of soft stone. There is a micro-engraving on the stone, the figure of a saint, a raised hand in a gesture of blessing, folds of clothing, even the outline of a halo. All of this is smaller than a fingernail. Such rings were worn as personal protection, almost like a pocket icon. People believed that even a small image could protect them on the road, in battle, and in sickness. This unearthed piece is almost undamaged. Even the patterned sidewalls have remained intact. Judging by the place where it was found, the ring was lost by a person who lived or traveled near the fortress that stood here in the 11th century, perhaps a merchant or a soldier. On Byzantine roads, such items were often lost, but usually they were destroyed. One striking detail. The engraving is so finely done that modern restorers had to make a copy using a microscope to fully understand the scene. Such miniatures were often worn away after just a few decades of use. An archaeological mistake. At the beginning of the 20th century, a series of objects was discovered in Egypt, which were immediately hailed as proof of the existence of an extremely ancient and advanced civilization. These were stone vessels with perfectly smooth walls, thin edges, and symmetry that are hard to explain by hand carving. Some of them had wall thicknesses of just a few millimeters, and yet they were carved from hard stone, diorite, and basalt. These vessels quickly became an argument in favor of lost technologies. The problem was that the finds themselves were taken out of context. They were often published without exact details about the layer, location, or related objects. In some cases, the origin is known only from the words of the first collectors or antique dealers. Archaeological documentation was either missing or reconstructed after the fact. Nevertheless, the images of the vessels began to live their own lives and for decades wandered through books and films. Later, during repeated studies and experiments, it turned out that some of these shapes can indeed be created using simple tools: sand, abrasive, and a lot of time. Several experimental archaeologists reproduced similar vessels, spending weeks and months of work on them. This did not eliminate the complexity of the finds, but it removed the need to invoke unknown technologies. However, not all objects could be explained with the same confidence. Some of the vessels remain poorly documented, and some have even disappeared from scientific circulation altogether. They cannot be re-examined, cannot be accurately dated, and cannot be compared with analogs. They exist only in publications and old photographs. This story is still used as an argument on both sides. They refer to it as proof that official science is hiding something. Others use it as an example of how easily a single discovery can turn into a sensation if it's taken out of context. Remains of ancient plants. Archaeologists from Guard Archaeology found a Bronze Age hoard in Rosemarkie. The hoard, dated to around 1000 BC, was discovered in a prehistoric settlement with 6 roundhouses and a bronze tomb. A wooden palisade that protected the settlement was also found at the excavation site. Laboratory studies showed that the hoard consists of 6 penannular bracelets, 1 bracelet with cup-shaped ends, 1 complete neck ring, 1 partial neck ring, and intertwined plant fibers. It is amazing that the plant cords tying the bracelets together were preserved thanks to the antimicrobial properties of the copper in the bronze. The cords remained intact for about 3,000 years. Mice ate an important message. Archaeologists sometimes make such amazing discoveries that it's hard to believe. One of the most unusual discoveries was an ancient Greek letter that was eaten by mice. It was written on a wooden tablet and contained an order to kill the messenger. Researchers were never able to prove whether this order was carried out. The letter, written between 257 and 248 BC, belonged to a man named Epharmastos. He sent it to his brother Zenon. The letter said, "Greetings. The letter you wrote to Menon about Calicon's money was eaten by mice. You would do me a favor if you write quickly so that Calicon is not delayed. Goodbye." The ancient Greeks often wrote letters on various topics: family stories, news, love messages, political views. Letters were an important means of communication and literary expression. The first mention of a letter in Greek literature appeared in Homer's Iliad, where the king gives a tablet to Bellerophon. In the 6th century BC, Herodotus describes correspondence between King Amasis and the tyrant Polycrates. Letters were written with a reed pen and ink on papyrus, which was then rolled up and tied with a thread. Official documents were sealed so that only the recipient could open them. In addition to papyrus, they used metal, wood, beeswax, clay tablets, limestone, or animal skin. The oldest Greek letters were written on lead tablets around 500 BC. The Minoan grill. In the display case of the Museum of Prehistoric Thera, there is what looks like an ordinary barbecue grill, but it is over 3,000 years old. The stone blocks of the Minoans from Santorini look like a miniature relief of a fortress wall. On the sides of the bull's heads, there are slots for skewers on top, and below, a neat row of round holes. Through these, air would blow on the coals, turning the portable structure into a real turbo grill of the Bronze Age. Imagine sailors in the port of Akrotiri tossing pieces of goat meat onto these stone pans, while the aroma of smoke drifts through the streets that are now buried under the ash of the eruption. Scientists have long debated why the Minoans needed such mobility. Was it for banquets on ships, street trading, or ritual feasts where the sacrifice was shared right at the sanctuary? Whichever theory turns out to be correct, the technology works flawlessly. Air enters beneath the coals, passes through a line of holes, and heats the stone evenly. Modern chefs do the same thing when they place a fan next to the grill. Every time we take a bite of hot meat on the Aegean coast, we're repeating a recipe that the Minoans perfected long before the Trojan War. An oak cart. Not far from Lake Sevan, in the Armenian village of Luchashin, archaeologists found an object that usually doesn't survive for thousands of years, a wooden cart. It lay in the ground for about 4,000 years, but remained so intact that its construction allows us to study Bronze Age transportation, not from drawings, but from a real object. The cart is made of oak, with massive wheels and well-preserved axles. Such finds are rare not only in the Caucasus. Wood almost always decays, and most often archaeologists find only metal parts. Here, the shape has been fully preserved, showing us how the local nobility's carts looked and were assembled. Luchashin is known for its large Bronze Age necropolis, and many rich burials included carts, weapons, and ornaments. Judging by the quality of the wood and the neat craftsmanship, the cart that was found also belonged to a person of high status. It was probably part of the burial inventory. For researchers, this find shows what transportation was like in the territory of Armenia at that time, and confirms that local communities actively used wheeled transport long before large states appeared here. The origin of the silver vessel. It took scientists 10 years to determine the origin of the unique silver vessel that is part of the Galloway hoard. It turned out that the artifact traveled from Western Asia to Scotland. This discovery added intrigue to one of the most important archaeological finds in the United Kingdom. The Galloway hoard was discovered in southern Scotland in 2014 by treasure hunter Derek McLennan. The treasure included a silver vessel wrapped in ancient cloth. Now, researchers have confirmed that the vessel was made in modern-day central Iran and was transported over a vast distance to Scotland more than 1,000 years ago. Inside the vessel, treasures such as silk and brooches were found. Laser cleaning of the vessel revealed intricate patterns characteristic of Zoroastrianism. the state religion of the Sassanids, the last Persian empire before the Muslim conquests. The entire hoard weighed more than 5 kilograms and included silver, gold, and other valuable materials. It was found on land belonging to the Church of Scotland near Balmaggy. The artifact is dated to around the year 900 AD and will be displayed for the first time at the Silk Roads exhibition at the British Museum in London. Other items from the hoard will be displayed at the National Museum of Scotland and the Kirkcudbright galleries. Including the artifact in the exhibition is very important, especially as it contains the oldest recorded silk in Scotland. The first astronomical observatory. A recently discovered ancient Egyptian observatory, the first of its kind, demonstrates the Egyptians' profound knowledge of astronomy and their close connection to spiritual and ritual practices. This is the largest and the first known observatory in the history of Egypt. The remains of a 6th century BC structure were found a few years ago during excavations in the ancient city of Buto, now known as Tel El Farain. In the Kafr el Sheikh Governorate, everything we found exceeded our expectations, said Qassam Ghanim, director of the Kafr el Sheikh Antiquities Authority and head of the Archaeological Mission. Archaeologists discovered the ruins of an L-shaped brick building with a central area of about 850 square meters. The eastern entrance leads to a place where sunlight illuminated the observation point for the sun and stars, where the astronomer priest stood. His image has been preserved on the walls, facing the rising sun, depicting the connection of the ancient Egyptians with the cosmos. Initially, researchers thought they had discovered a temple, but the discovery of artifacts and inscriptions related to astronomy, such as sundials and other time-measuring instruments, led to the conclusion that it was an observatory. Inside the hall, astronomical images of the sunrise and sunset during the 3 seasons were found. The artifacts found, such as statues of Horus and Osiris, as well as a bronze figurine of Osiris with a snake, confirmed the importance of the observatory's spiritual and scientific role. Amber from prehistoric depths. In a quarry near Kaliningrad, a nugget of Baltic amber weighing more than 1 kilogram was found. Its age is between 35 and 45 million years. It has a triangular shape, a smooth surface, and minimal chipping. It seems as if it wasn't created by nature but shaped by time, almost perfect, as if it was waiting to be found. Baltic amber is a fragile material. It rarely reaches us in this form. Usually there are shards, fragments, inclusions, but this piece is a monolith. Experts say that such nuggets are unique, and each one gets its own name. After the examination, it will either be displayed in a museum or auctioned at the private Amber Forum auction, where rare specimens are sold to collectors worldwide. But what really makes it special and unique? It's not the price, it's the age, 40 million years. That's long before humans appeared. This was a time when mammals, as we know them, did not yet exist on Earth, and everything that could get trapped in this amber came from a world we will never see. Something inside it could be older than we realize. A particle of the atmosphere, a spore from an unknown plant, a trace of a creature whose name we will never know, or something that was never supposed to end up there at all. Strange scratches on the stones. The Swedish island of Gotland is located in the Baltic Sea, and if you move away from the tourist spots and look carefully under your feet, you start to notice something strange. There are deep scratches on the stones, long, straight, clearly made by someone's hand. And not just 1 or 2, but thousands of such marks all over the island. On boulders, on cliffs, on separate stone blocks. In some places, dozens appear on one stone, but none are found on the one next to it. When people started talking about this seriously in the 19th century, the first thing that came to mind was that weapons were sharpened here. The Baltic Islands were a center for trading swords and axes, and the sharpening marks on the stone seemed like a logical explanation, but it quickly turned out that the size and shape of these scratches just weren't suitable for sharpening. Not a single sword or axe from that era would even fit into these narrow grooves. And the strangest thing is, no debris from work was ever found near these stones. No metal shavings, no blade fragments, nothing at all that would indicate anything was ever sharpened here. And then something interesting was discovered. The same kind of grooves can be found in Norway, Finland, and France. There, they are called polissoir and are dated to the Neolithic period. The same culture that built dolmens and erected menhirs. Similar traces have been found in Australia and India. All over the world, similar marks are found in stone. And that in itself is already strange. Identical scratches made by people who couldn't possibly have known about each other. But nowhere in the world are there as many of them as on Gotland. Scientists have counted more than 3,600 such marks there. Some are right on the cliffs, others are on separate stones scattered all over the island. Scientists have put forward several theories. The first is astronomical. Many of the grooves are oriented toward the sun or the moon. Perhaps this was a way to track time and seasons. The second theory is ritual. The symbolic marks are connected with fertility or death cults. And finally, the practical theory, polishing wooden poles or bone tools, the traces of which simply have not survived. None of the theories explain why people on different continents who could not have known about each other created the same shapes. Why are there dozens of grooves in some places, but none nearby? And why go to so much effort on hard limestone? 3,600 grooves on one island. And there's still no answer. What do you think it is? Write your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your theories. Maya Triangle. In the jungles of Guatemala, archaeologists found not one, but 3 ancient Maya cities, built in the shape of a triangle. The distance between them is about 5 kilometers. Everything indicates that this was a system, not random, not chaotic, centers connected with purpose, angles precisely aligned with celestial bodies, temples, pyramids, and water canals, as if they were parts of a single mechanism. The city of Los Abuelos got its name in honor of 2 stone figures, of a man and a woman. They are considered ancestors. In this city, the buildings are oriented toward the solstice and equinox. Most likely, the city was a kind of ritual observatory. The remains of human and animal bones, vessels, and arrowheads indicate that something more than just astronomy took place here. In Petnade, archaeologists discovered a 33-meter pyramid with a flat top and an altar in the shape of a frog, a symbol of the renewal of life and the cycle. The walls of the chamber inside the pyramid are covered with faded frescoes in red, white, and black. Their meaning has not yet been deciphered. Cambrial, the third city, stood out for its engineering rather than its height. A reservoir atop the palace supplied water to the steppe via canals. Archaeologists believe that these canals were used not only for water, but also for waste disposal. This means that the Maya already had a city model that included life support systems. Ancient stone circles in Saudi Arabia. Archaeologists in Saudi Arabia have excavated 8 ancient stone circles that served as dwellings for people more than 7,000 years ago. About 345 such structures have been identified using aerial photography in the lava field of Harad Uwaid, not far from the city of Al-Ula in the northwest of Saudi Arabia. The stone circles have a diameter of 4 to 8 meters and include at least 1 standing stone in the center. During the excavation, archaeologists discovered numerous basalt stone tools. From just 5 circles, almost 225 kilograms of stone tools or their fragments were recovered. Bones of sheep, goats, and cows were also found. Among the finds were various seashells from the Red Sea, located about 120 kilometers to the west. The round shape of houses was a global phenomenon in early architecture, and rectangular houses appeared later, during the Neolithic period. The architecture of standing stone circles in Saudi Arabia is similar to structures found in Jordan, which date to about 500 years earlier. The people who built these structures also raised sheep, goats, and cattle. Argentina. When I first read about Odessa, it seemed to me like just a plot for a movie, an organization created specifically to smuggle Nazis out of Europe. But then I saw documents, maps, interviews, and photographs that don't explain themselves but say more than official reports. After the war, dozens, hundreds of SS men disappeared, not just went into hiding, but vanished. And almost all the trails led to one place, South America, especially Argentina, a country where dictators openly sympathized with Hitler, and in the mountains, those who didn't want to be found were hiding. In 2017, a cache was found in the Argentine Andes, weapons from the time of the Third Reich, medals, maps with German inscriptions, all carefully hidden. Hidden not like museum exhibits, but like things that might be needed. Later, CIA archives surfaced, recording conversations where German bases, a hidden settlement, and even Hitler were mentioned. I'm not a supporter of conspiracy theories, but when too many random discoveries form a chain, it's no longer a coincidence. This is a route. Some really left, some continued their work, not on the front lines, but in the shadows. What's especially frightening is not that they might have survived, but that they might have lived for a long time, and to pass on not orders, but ideas. Ritual rice. In the northern cave of Retidian, archaeologists found rice husk imprints on ceramics that are at least 3,500 years old. The only traces are a thin starch film and phytoliths, but that's enough to confirm that the settlers reached Guam, carrying rice across 2,300 kilometers of open ocean. Fields, terraces, and sickles were never found, which means the grains were kept not for meals, but for rituals, perhaps once a year, to remind the spirits of their ancestors about their distant home in Taiwan. In the hands of the islanders, rice turned from everyday food into a symbol of origin. And that's why tiny traces on pottery turned out to be more important than an entire cemetery of bone harpoons. The scorpion mace. In Hierakonpolis, a stone mace was found, which is now called the scorpion mace. This is not a weapon in the practical sense, but a ritual object made of limestone dating to the very end of the pre-dynastic period, around 3,200–3,100 BCE. A scene is carved on it depicting public authority. A crowned man with a hoe stands before rows of people and symbols of subordinate territories. All this takes place even before the appearance of the pharaoh, in the usual sense. The strangest detail is the combination of roles. The man on the mace is depicted both as a ruler and as a participant in a ritual, as if he is not just governing, but personally opening the land. This is not a mythological scene and not a god. This is a living person, shown at the moment of demonstrating control over space and people. At the same time, there is no name, no title, no explanatory inscription nearby. Power is shown through action, not words. On the same mace, there are scenes of violence and subjugation, but they are presented not as chaos, but as an orderly process. In essence, we are looking at one of the earliest examples of political propaganda, carved in stone. The scorpion mace is problematic because it appears before the system that should have produced it. There is a ritual, there is a public scene, there is a demonstration of power, but there is still no state with names and laws. This object does not explain who Scorpion is or who he was. It only captures the moment when power already demands an audience. The remains of Hobbit Thorin, as archaeologists called him, lived about 40 to 50,000 years ago, at a time when the last Neanderthals disappeared from the face of the earth. His remains were found in a cave in the south of France, where he was probably hiding from the bitter cold. In 2000 and 2015, archaeologists discovered a well-preserved fossilized jaw with 31 teeth and finger phalanges. Interestingly, Thorin's teeth, despite being worn down from active chewing, were in good condition. Analysis showed that this was an adult male, probably quite young, since Neanderthals lived on average about 20 years. The most striking thing was the genetic research. Thorin's DNA was very different from all known Neanderthal samples. This indicates an isolated population, rather than one that split from the rest of the Neanderthals about 100 to 105,000 years ago. Interestingly, just a 10-day walk from this cave, there was another Neanderthal community, but according to the analysis, they did not interact. Researchers are pondering how Neanderthals perceived the world and why they were so isolated. Lack of sociability was one of their characteristic traits. At the time they existed, there were about 10,000 Neanderthals in the world, and over hundreds of thousands of years, they became uncommunicative. They had a high degree of inbreeding, which is confirmed by numerous congenital anomalies. Finding one of the last Neanderthals is an incredible stroke of luck. Isotopes in the bones confirm that Thorin lived in the harsh climate of the Ice Age. Scientists still debate why Neanderthals disappeared. Was it because of the harsh climate or competition with Cro-Magnons? Anthropologists believe that climate was not the decisive factor, since the Ice Ages began long before their disappearance. It is likely that the more advanced Cro-Magnons displaced them. Cro-Magnons were not against interbreeding, and in the genome of modern humans there is Neanderthal admixture, while in Neanderthals traces of sapiens have not been found. Interestingly, a fragment of bone with a scratched drawing, possibly depicting a mammoth, was recently found in the Bryansk region of Russia. This is a rare example that indicates the presence of visual art among Neanderthals, while Cro-Magnons left behind many works. Stonehenge doesn't even come close. The stone circles of Gambela are located in the territory of modern Senegal and Gambia and are one of the most mysterious and impressive archaeological finds in West Africa. These megalithic structures, consisting of thousands of individual stones, are organized into circles and lines, covering more than 30,000 square kilometers. They are known as the megalithic complexes of Siningane and Vashu in Senegal, as well as Kerbach and Vanyak in Gambia. The age of these stone circles is estimated to be about 1,500 years, although some of them may be significantly older, suggesting prolonged use and importance of these sites for the local ancient cultures. Each stone circle consists of massive pillars, with heights ranging from 1 to 2.5 meters, and the diameter of the circles can reach up to 8 meters. On average, each stone weighs about 7 tons. The complex includes more than 1,700 individual circles, making it one of the largest collections of megaliths in the world. These stone circles are often compared to Stonehenge because of their mysterious origin and unknown purpose. However, Stonehenge doesn't even come close to the scale of the stone circles of Gambela. The purpose of this gigantic structure still remains a subject of discussion and research. One of the most popular theories is that they had ritual and ceremonial significance. The stone circles could have served as places for religious ceremonies, gatherings, and burials. Indeed, burial mounds have been found near some of the circles, which supports the idea of funerary rituals. In some places, artifacts such as pottery and iron tools have been found, which could have been used in rituals or as offerings. Some scholars believe that the arrangement of the stones is connected to observations of the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, and could have been used to determine calendar cycles or to hold important agricultural festivals. The ancient builders used local materials, such as alaturite stones, but how they were worked and set in place is still unclear. Ocean Phantom. At the end of November 1896, 2 boys were riding their bicycles along the beach of Anastasia Island and suddenly saw something in the sand that made them drop their bikes. On the shore lay a carcass the size of a boat, shapeless, pale pink, as if made of rubber. No bones, no eyes, no head. Just a huge, dense mass of flesh that looked as if the ocean had washed ashore a creature from a nightmare. The local doctor, Dr. Webb, arrived at the scene the next morning and immediately realized it wasn't a whale. But what was it then? The carcass was elastic, heavy, and by his estimate weighed about 5 tons. He decided that what they had before them was a gigantic octopus unknown to science. Later, the photographs were sent to the university, and Professor Verrill, the leading expert on cephalopods, at first confirmed the guess, and then went further and named the creature a new species, Octopus giganteus. 6 horses dragged the carcass away from the water to prevent the waves from taking it, making it a local sensation. People came to see the Florida monster, which seemed to have stepped right out of the pages of sea legends. But decades later, when the preserved tissue samples were studied under an electron microscope, everything fell apart. There was no giant octopus. The tissue was made up of pure collagen. It was whale skin decomposed to a state where both the shape and the bones had disappeared. Today, scientists call such finds globsters, dense lumps of organic matter that the ocean washes ashore, turning an ordinary carcass into something resembling a mythical creature. The Chinese tried an ancient drink. In ancient tombs in China's Shanxi province, a tightly sealed bronze vessel was found. Researchers discovered about 300 milliliters of liquid inside, which turned out to be the remains of a fermented alcoholic beverage about 2,300 years old. 2 people who tasted this liquid noted its metallic taste. People learned to make fermented drinks back in ancient times. The earliest evidence of this was found in the Reykjavik cave in Israel. About 13,000 years ago, people brewed beer from grains. In the Neolithic era, alcoholic beverages began to be produced in the Middle East and China using millet and rice. In a bronze vessel measuring 30.5 centimeter in height and 21.5 centimeter in diameter, they found 300 milliliters of a clear liquid, or more precisely, a fermented alcoholic beverage that was used as a burial offering. Researchers found in the liquid starch granules from 4 types of millet: shumiza, adlay, Job's tears, legumes, wheat, barley, and rice. In addition, they identified organisms involved in fermentation, including mold fungi of the Aspergillus genus and baker's yeast. According to scientists, the drink resembled modern yellow wine, huangju. A Siberian blacksmith. The Krasnoyarsk excavation at Pinchuga 6 at first looked like just another standard Xiongnu burial mound field. Everything changed when a buckle with a neatly welded loop was taken out of the burial lens. Metallographic analysis showed that the joint was made using real welding, which is a technological breakthrough for the 3rd century AD. Nearby lay miniature hammers, knife blanks, and a charred half of a forge, all in one grave, with the remains cremated together with the tools. A classic burial rite for a craftsman who, according to beliefs, would need his forge in the afterlife. At that time in Siberia, such welded seams were unprecedented. The iron and phosphorus composition matches the Xiongnu steppe blacksmith's methods. But the method itself is clearly core-based, coming from farther south. It traveled via the Altai-Yenisei corridor, settled in an isolated area, and was preserved there. An ancient Roman supermarket in the ocean. Archaeologists have discovered an ancient Roman supermarket on the Channel Islands off the coast of France where various goods were traded. Research that began in 2008 led to the discovery of 2 Roman coins which point to this finding. One coin depicts Caesar as a teenager, and the other shows an emperor who was killed by invading Goths. Alderney Island, the northernmost of the Norman Islands, could have served as a trading post for the Romans. Archaeologist Jason Monaghan noted that remains of Roman structures have been found here, including a grotto, which indicates a permanent Roman presence. They could have monitored ships bringing goods from the Mediterranean to France. Archaeologists believe that Roman soldiers lived on the island, controlling trade routes and protecting them from pirates. It's possible that soldiers' families and Roman officials also lived here. In 2017, using electrical equipment, an Iron Age burial and parts of a Roman building were discovered on the island, confirming long-term settlement. Excavations showed that the Roman-era building had 3 rooms, a courtyard, a paved area, and a garbage dump where one of the Antoninianus coins was found, dated to 255 AD, equivalent to 2 denarii. In another layer of the building, a bronze coin of the Roman co-emperor Valens was found, dated between 364 and 367 AD, who was killed at the Battle of Adrianople. About 27 meters from the building, the remains of a Roman fort were discovered. Archaeologists believe that many more buildings from the Roman era may be hidden under the sand dunes, creating a mini Pompeii effect. Artifacts in the grave. When I first saw this find, I had the feeling that someone had deliberately planted artifacts there. It looked so implausible. A burial from the time of World War II in Poland, in the Tukola forest. Everything was standard. Remains of German uniforms, equipment, a dog tag, but next to the body there were Mesolithic stone tools, Neolithic pottery, and Roman coins. Genuine, verified, not a fake. I spent a long time trying to understand the official explanation. There's only one explanation. They say it's just a coincidence. It just so happened that ancient tribes used to live in that place, and the soldier died right there. Yeah, sure, just a coincidence. This place had drawn Nazi archaeological interest since the war's start. They were obsessed with ancient civilizations. It was more mania than mere interest. The NNR would send expeditions to Tibet, to Iran, to Africa, but even in Europe they were actively searching for evidence to support their theory that Aryans were not just a people, but the heirs of an ancient world empire. And here, in this grave, there's an SS officer and objects that are 2,000 years old. I can't shake the thought, what if this isn't a coincidence? What if he was actually part of some program, testing, transporting artifacts, or even guarding them? The Nazis attached ritual significance to objects from the past. They believed that ancient artifacts were keys, not to history, but to power. Maybe this soldier didn't die by accident. Maybe he died because of what he was guarding. A giraffe made of quartz. At first glance, it's a child's figurine, a giraffe sitting calmly, as if frozen in a moment. But it's carved from a single piece of rose quartz. one of the most difficult stones to work with. It was created not in Africa or Asia, but in France in 1900 by the House of Cartier. Why the jewelers of the Art Nouveau era decided to carve a giraffe from quartz is unclear. Perhaps it was a symbol of distant lands, exoticism, or a hidden reference to ancient images. After all, in Egypt and Mesopotamia, they also carved animal figurines from minerals. Only now it's for private collections, not for temples. A diver found an extremely rare treasure. Back in 1715-11, ships left the port of Cuba and headed to Europe with treasures. However, a hurricane off the east coast of Florida sank the ships, and 1,500 sailors died. Gitschlag, his business partner Mike Penninger, as well as Nick Emilio and Karina Leah, discovered more than 200 silver coins on the seafloor. The value of the find, depending on the condition of the coins, can range from $12,000 to $130,000. When exploring sunken ships, the team often finds ceramic and metal fragments, but coins are a real rarity. Silver coins can become corroded after hundreds of years in the water, but piastres are easy to recognize. The treasures were found among the wreckage of one of the two flagships. Gitschlag believes that the coins may have been minted in Mexico City, and the hoard has not yet been appraised, but most of it will go to the museum, and only a small part will be put up for sale. Step pyramids in Spain. The pyramids of Gomar are a unique archaeological complex located on the island of Tenerife, one of the Canary Islands belonging to Spain. These pyramid-shaped structures, built from basalt stones, attract the attention of researchers and tourists thanks to their mysterious history and unusual architecture. There are a total of 6 pyramids within the complex, which have a stepped shape and terraced bases, reminiscent of the structures of ancient Mesoamerican civilizations. Some researchers believe that the pyramids were built by the ancient Aboriginal people of the Canary Islands, the Guanches, who used them for ritual and religious purposes. In support of this theory, they point to the similarity of the Gomar pyramids with other ancient structures that were used for worshiping gods and holding ceremonies. However, there is also an alternative point of view, suggesting that the pyramids were built in the 19th century as part of agricultural terraces. A distinctive feature of the Gomar pyramids is their orientation in relation to astronomical events. Studies have shown that the pyramids are constructed in such a way as to be oriented toward the solstice. On the day of the summer solstice, you can observe a unique phenomenon when the shadow of the pyramids aligns perfectly with their faces, creating the effect of a double sunset. This astronomical alignment suggests the possible use of the pyramids as an observatory or for conducting calendar rituals. Ancient multiplication table. Archaeologists discovered in the ruins of the Fujiwara Palace in Japan's Nara Prefecture a fragment of a wooden tablet with one of the oldest multiplication tables in Japan. The find is about 1,300 years old. The ruins of the Fujiwara Palace are the remains of an ancient capital that existed until 710, when the capital was moved to Nara. The tablet was found at the site where the guard post of the Amonfu guards in the Fujiwara government is believed to have been located. The find measures about 16 by 1 centimeter. Researchers believe that it was part of a more complete multiplication table, which dates back to the late 7th or early 8th century. Even back then, such tables were used in government institutions. Using infrared analysis, the following equations were read on the tablet. All the inscriptions are made using kanji, Chinese characters that are also used in modern Japanese. The multiplication table starts with multiplication by 9 and contains 5 equations written horizontally in a single row. If the tablet were whole, its length would be about 33 meters. This 5-line writing style corresponds to the Chinese styles of the Qin and Han dynasties. The tablet was probably used by the Imonfu office, which was responsible for security and administrative tasks, including counting working days and taxes. A city in the center of the Sahara. The Central Sahara in Niger is a territory that is almost inaccessible to people. Any tourist heading south from the Mediterranean coast faced a huge number of obstacles: giant dunes, exhausting heat, and humidity. The returning winds create a landscape that is almost devoid of life, but those who venture into the depths of the Great Desert are in for a surprise. Surrounded by sandy canyons on a lonely plateau lie the ruins of the vast fortress city of Jado. These ruins, which are between 800 and 1,000 years old, are a mystery. The city emerged when this part of the desert was much wetter and more fertile. Little is known about the people who lived here, and who built this city remains unknown. Was it a fortress city? This is a Ksar, a typical North African fortified settlement. Such settlements usually consist of residential buildings constructed around a central storehouse for provisions, with an emphasis on defensive functions. Ksars like Jado were built from palm trunks covered with adobe mixture, hardened by desert winds to the strength of metal. What sets Jado apart from most similar Czars is its incredible size. The colossal fortress towers over the desert, dwarfing the entire surrounding landscape. The Kanuri people who inhabit the desert in the heart of the Sahara were the last known inhabitants of this place. It is possible that the city was inherited by them from an older culture about which no records have survived. The turning point that likely forced the Kanuri to leave Jado was probably the depletion of drinking water. As the green landscape turned into desert, the water became brackish, and the environment too harsh for survival. People lived on the Jado Plateau for about 60,000 years, leaving behind rock paintings and other evidence of their presence. Small livestock were raised here as early as 7000 BC, and large livestock appeared around 3500. BC rock paintings found in the Air Mountains date from about 5,500 to 4,500 years ago. They depict a world with dense vegetation and abundant animals, completely unlike the modern landscape. Today, reaching the once great city is very difficult. This part of the world is unstable, and the tribes inhabiting the area are constantly fighting for limited resources. The Kanuri now live in the neighboring desert village of Chirfa, but every year they return to their ancestors' land to harvest dates. Strangely, the date palms continue to bear fruit. The Kanuri are a remnant of the ancient Kanyam civilization, which ruled Central Sahara from 700 to 1300 AD. The origins of this empire are shrouded in mystery, and it is unknown whether Jado was founded during this period or even earlier. If the Kanyam built Jado, then excavations could reveal a lot about this culture. But if they inherited it, perhaps someday something else will be discovered, hidden from human eyes and guarded by the desert, waiting to reveal all its secrets. And you can learn even more secrets about the ancient world on our channel, Mysteries of Ancient Egypt. New videos on what happened to the Maya and on the history of ancient China are waiting for you. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Goodbye, everyone.